Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Let's chat about a few things here. Got a couple things to talk about. You have a new book that's coming out soon. It's called Trailblazer. I had my assistant put these in, so it looks like I did my homework. No, I actually read it. I read it and I enjoyed it. Talk about lots of things in there. One of the things I'm most curious about to start off with, though, because I think a lot of people in this room are either in the process of raising or maybe have raised money. It's been about 20 years, a little over 20 years, since Salesforce had to raise money. How do you think the environment's changed between then and now?
Well, I think it's changing. I mean, you know, when we were raising money, no one would give us money. So that was difficult. We raised it all privately through individuals. I was lucky that I had some rich friends. If I didn't, I would not have been able to get the company going. No one on Sand Hill Road would give me any money.
What were they so scared of? What did they understand about the business?
Well, I think that they did not understand this incredible opportunity for cloud computing. They certainly did not see that this would be a company with 45,000 employees and more than $100 billion market cap, top 5 software company. They just could not see it. And that was an amazing moment in time where I was going in and out of these venture capitalist offices with no term sheet, no deal, no opportunity. And I found friends of mine here in San Francisco and also Japan who gave me money, and it was private money.
And if you think back to that time versus or shortly thereafter, after you got your money and went into what was your primary goal after it was so hard to raise money? What was your first primary goal in getting that company off the ground?
Well, I think for us, we always had a vision that was really 3 things. 1, we wanted to build a new technology model. Now we call it the cloud. 2, we have a new business model, which is subscription, or really an orientation around the customer. That was very different 2 decades ago. And 3, we had an idea that we could integrate a set of values into our business, that that our values would create value, that we would take this 1-1-1 model that I had come up with, 1% of our equity, 1% of all of our product, 1% of all of our employees' time. I mean, it was very easy because we had no equity, we had no product, we had no time, no
Right.
employees. But today, we've done 4 million hours of volunteerism. We've given away $1/3 of $1 billion. We've also run 45,000 nonprofits and NGOs on our service for free, which is about $1 billion of product a year. And it's, really was a segue into a different type of business for us. That at that point we realized that, that our business was really more than just about a shareholder return, that our business was becoming about a stakeholder return. That yes, we had these incredible investors, these people who have given us this money, they're going to have this great return. In fact, since we went, public in 2004, we've had a 3,000+% return. It's been a very good return. But we've also had an excellent stakeholder return as well. We've been able to give to our public schools. We've been able to, support our employees at scale. The things that we do as a organization, we realize that it's more than just our shareholders. It's all of our stakeholders, which are, it's our employees, it's our customers, it's our partners. But look, if you're in San Francisco and you're the largest employer in San Francisco like we are, it's also going to be about the homeless. You can see that when we walk in here down the street, you're looking into the eyes of those people who are on the street who, they have to be one of my key stakeholders. That's why we fought so aggressively for Proposition C.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book how you went to Matt for that.
This is really important to us, that who are your key stakeholders?
Right.
And yes, it's going to be those public schools. It's going to be the women inside your organization. They're going to be a key stakeholder. That's why we fight for equal pay, for equal work. That's why that's so important to us.
Right.
It could be for our LGBTQ employees. That's why we went to Indiana. But in all cases, we're looking at not just our shareholder return, we're looking at our stakeholder return. And that has really created a company that we can look back and say, not only have we done well, but we've also done good. And that has really worked for us as a business, and we want to advocate that for other entrepreneurs who are starting their businesses, to be conscious and think about what kind of business are you creating?
Right.
What is really important to you as an entrepreneur?
And I think that's an interesting segue into stuff that's going on right now. I mean, we look at the WeWork situation, where Adam Newman obviously has been taken out of control of the company, and certainly it isn't going to plan, right? It's something has happened in the company culture at WeWork that has led it astray. And this is not the first time we've seen this in recent years. And I'm wondering what you think about this kind of cult of the founder-first mentality of like the founder knows best and they deserve to have complete control over the company, and how that compares to Salesforce's approach over the years.
Well, I think I said this in the New York Times on Sunday, which is that shareholder return is going to be table stakes. You have to have a sound business.
Right.
You have to have a sound technology model, a sound business model. You have to take care of your employees. You have to do the traditional business pieces. But then you have to think about what kind of business are you building. That's where the stakeholder return starts to come together. And when you get these things, two things working, you're going to have a fantastic company that's going to be solid. But you've got to operate with that level of values and that level of ethics. And if you're not, then you're not going to really exist, I think, in this environment. I really strongly believe that capitalism as we know it is dead, that we're going to see a new kind of capitalism. Mm-hmm. And that new kind of capitalism that's going to emerge is not the Milton Friedman capitalism that it's just about making money.
Right.
And if your orientation is just about making money, I don't think you're going to hang out very long as a CEO or a founder of a company. You have to be more than that in today's world. You certainly have to be more than that in San Francisco.
And that's because
you certainly
need that
have to be more than
right?
that in our tech industry as well.
Yeah, and that's because you need that support of your employees. You need their faith, their trust in what you're trying to do, right?
Well, if trust isn't your highest value, then you have to ask yourself what is. I think that is the existential issue that is on the mind of a lot of founders in our industry who are going through very serious challenges right now with society. The question is, what is your highest value? And is your highest value trust? And if your highest value is not trust, then what is it? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't know, those people around you, your customers, your employees, your partners, all the key stakeholders that I just went through, they're going to figure it out. And then they're going to say, wow, this is not the person who I maybe want to work for or invest in or be a part of. And as evidence of that, your employees will start walking out. We've certainly seen that this year in Silicon Valley. Your customers will walk out. Your investors will walk out. I mean, we see that. We have these stories. And this is where every entrepreneur needs to wake up and hear that message, that they need to think about what are their highest values that they're really going to anchor their company to. And if they don't, then they will pay a price. And we see that over and over and over again. And it oftentimes gets played out in this court of public opinion that you can see that people say, wow, this is not a company or a person that we want to do business with because of the value system.
Right. And do you think the VC model, this model of hyperscaler first mentality of like, look, we're going to give you a bunch of money to hypercharge your business. It seems viable so far. We're going to juice it up with this. Do you think that adds undue torsion where people can't build in those values? They can't take the time to build them in early on?
I don't think it's ever about the money. I think it's always about the culture. Peter Drucker, who is a fantastic, prophet of business, certainly someone I learned a lot from, said it very well. He said that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That means you have to look at the culture of your company. You have to look at the culture of yourself as a leader. Who are you? What is inside your heart? What do you really want for yourself, for your company, for your industry, for your community? What are you trying to do for others? Are you trying to improve the state of your checkbook, or are you trying to improve the state of the world? And I think that it's a slight shift for people, because I do think that we come out of a world of Milton Friedmanism. We're thinking, oh yeah, shareholder return, it's just about making money.
justifies
maybe that's
it,
the
right?
way it was, but that is not where we are going. We're going into a world where we're really going to be, looked at by our values. And this is really important. And this is what I, try to work on in myself, in my own leadership, in our company. It starts with us. We have to be that example. And then we also have to, and it's a challenge. Of course, I read about that in the book that you mentioned, that I'm wrong about these things far more than I'm right. But by listening, to our employees, by our customers, our partners, we've been able to be guided to the right place.
Right. I was struck by how many times in the book you came to this realization that, something was awry, something was amiss in the company, and the trigger for that realization was directly from an employee. It wasn't like, oh, the profits are down, or this is and in fact, business seemed to be going quite well at times where things like pay disparity or the gay rights issue came up, and then the crisis was then alerted by the employees.
This is the fourth book. So the first book, when we started the company, was Compassionate Capitalism. That's where we laid out our kind of fundamental tenets. This is what we're trying to create, compassionate capitalism. That's 20 years ago. Then we laid in a second book, which was The Business of Changing the World. That was really about saying, okay, you know what? Here's other companies who are doing it right. Then 3, we wrote about Behind the Cloud. That was how we got from an idea to $1 billion in revenue. Well, I think that's something that every entrepreneur wants to learn about. So we wrote a how-to book on how to do that. This is a book on how we then went from $1 billion in revenue to, we've given guidance that this year we're going to do about $17 billion. So that shift, when you start to operate at scale, you need to think about your values much more deeply. You need to listen much more deeply. This concept of deeper listening, cultivating your beginner's mind as an entrepreneur, to really pay attention. And as all these amazing things start to happen to you, your ego and your arrogance and all these things can really start to take you over. That's where it's like, whoa, how do I get broken back down so that I can listen? If you can't have a one-on-one conversation with someone, if you can't listen to any employee or any customer or any stakeholder, or I'll give you an example. I was at a public school last week because we do a lot of work here in the San Francisco and Oakland public schools. We've given about $67 million to the public schools in the last 7 years. It's been a really exciting program that we're part of. And I was giving this speech, and I was on a playground at Presidio Middle School, and I'm giving the speech that I'm giving to you and to everybody here. And the difference is these kids are middle school kids, and I'm looking in their eyes, and I feel that in my heart. These are my stakeholders. If my company is not benefiting them, then who is it benefiting? And that is a key stakeholder of mine. I'm looking into their eyes, saying, I am here to support you. And one of the reasons that we have a K through 12 computer science program in San Francisco, and that San Francisco is now the highest rated math program of all the metro schools in California, I think is because of these incredible investments that we've been able to do in partnership with San Francisco Unified School District and the Oakland Unified School District with their core principals and their superintendents. I mean, that is the gift of having a business, that business is the greatest platform for change. That's what I love about my business after 20 years. It's what gets me excited about getting up and going to work every day is I can improve the world through my business. Not only build great products, have great customer relationships, have a great shareholder return, but I can have a great stakeholder return also. I can use my business as a platform for change. And that is what is exciting to me.
And what do you, in that vein, what do you think the world thinks when they look at Silicon Valley, San Francisco especially? Now, the difficulties that San Francisco is undergoing right now in dealing with its homeless population, with the city infrastructure even on some levels, its support programs. And it says, look, this is the heart, or at least the head of Silicon Valley in some ways. Why? All these tech companies are coming from there. They're creating products for the world. Why should we listen to these people?
You can see it in the battle that went down exactly a year ago. where I was fighting for Prop C. We put $7 million into Prop C. This is what we wanted to achieve was we're trying to tax ourselves. We wanted to pay 0.5% of our revenues to directly address the homeless problem, which we need significantly more funding for in San Francisco, and this was going to give $30 million a month, and I was fighting some of the other leaders in Silicon Valley who do not want to give up their profits or their revenue, and they don't care. And they're not investing in local programs. They are not supporting. It's really a tale of two worlds. And I feel that very strongly. It got played out really well. Now, 62% of the votes in San Francisco came in for Prop C, but it's still not paying out because we didn't get to 66%.
Okay.
That's why it's in the courts. And then if the courts actually determine that that was a fair vote, then it will be enacted, which is what we all want. So this is where we are, you know, which is why was everyone not on that bandwagon? But you had basically people in Silicon Valley or investors who are anti-tax, who do not realize that if we're constantly optimizing income taxes and corporate taxes, then you're going to strip out the bottom of your social programs. And they don't seem to care. They don't seem to care that we don't have enough to be able to give to these programs. And that's what has to change, not just in our city, but in our industry and probably every industries. And some are changing and some are still resisting. And I think it's very much evidence of what happened a year ago.
And how do you think we change those minds of those people so that the next time an important issue like Prop C comes up, how do you get them to flip that bit, you know, to understand that, like, look, this in the grand scheme of things, we make a shit ton of money, and this isn't that much, you know, to pay to help build this foundation and keep it solid.
It has to come ultimately from them as individually as leaders, and then it has to come from their employees or their customers or their partners. You know, in each one of the gambits that we kind of go through in the book and tell these stories, Prop C is one of them, but there's many stories that, you know, we are fighting those forces. They're out there. And in each case, they line up against us. And in some cases we win, and in some cases we lose. But we know that we're ultimately on the right side of history, because what are we going to do? Leave all these homeless people on the streets? This is ridiculous what's going on. And they're telling us that it's not a problem. It's up 17% since we were working a year ago. That's what's crazy, you know? And yet we're still fighting those people. And they're saying, oh no, we're not going to do anything and lower our taxes even further. It's a joke.
Yeah. Well, I agree. So, for what it's worth.
All right. Well, thank you.
I pay my taxes. You got one.
Thank you, Matthew.
In the introduction to your book, you say that when CEOs won't take responsibility, then I think you have no choice for the government, but for the government to come in. Do you think that time is now for Facebook, or is it approaching?
I've been saying that for 2 years. I mean, you know, Facebook is the new cigarettes. It should be regulated. I said that, by the way, in January of... Hey, the first time I said that, nobody applauded. It was January...
I think people realize it now.
...of 2018. Well, I think they hadn't really seen Cambridge Analytica. They hadn't watched the big hack on Netflix. They hadn't seen the 50 or 100,000 developers that they've now flipped off because all of their data has already been harvested and used against them. They hadn't heard about that, you know, Cambridge Analytica was using this data to identify the persuaders to go in and shift the election, you know, in a certain direction. And not just our election here, but other elections in other countries as well. That was amazing. And, you know, the government has to step in. And, you know, ultimately, we also need, and we have now a California privacy law, which is something that I supported and happy to see enacted. But we need a national privacy law here in the U.S. as well. This is a critical thing that all of us should be acting for, because otherwise you're going to get a patchwork of privacy laws from every state in our country, and I don't think our industry wants to have to navigate that. That's a critical part of where we're going. We have got to get our privacy and our data locked down so that we all know exactly where we're going. And when it comes to regulation, the government is doing too little too late. They should be stepped in now, and they should be working hard to make those changes. And some of those leaders understand that, and some of them are still waiting to understand that.
Do you think that being a public company for the past 15 years has made you safer in some ways? Because I think a lot of private companies these days, we're seeing governance issues all over the place. I mean, WeWork is a recent example, but we have also seen it in the case of Uber and other companies where you're like, wow, this, I can't believe this is the way they were running internally.
In all of those cases, my opinion has been, and I've directly advised many of those CEOs directly, they are staying private way too long. They don't understand what the public markets do is indeed the great reckoning, but it cleanses their company of all of the bad stuff that they have. It forces them to kind of apply the regulations necessary to have a clean company, whether it's their implementation of Sarbanes-Oxley, whether it's SEC regulations. It helps them to kind of clean things up. And for these companies that don't do that or just wait too long, by the time they go public, it's too late in many cases. They haven't made the changes to their business model, their technology model, or their stakeholder model, and then maybe they've gotten to that point, it's over, and they're not going to recover. So I think companies, like we went public, we were $100 million in revenue. That was about the right time. And that was a good time because we're small enough that we could make those changes and adjustments, and there's a lot of those that continually happen. And that includes the people on your team, your chief financial officer, your lawyers, the people who are really like keeping you, on the straight and narrow, but also that you want to create a great company. And great companies in many cases are the public companies. Not in all cases. There's some great private companies, but the vast majority of the great companies that are out there are public.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'd take another half hour, but I've already gone over time. So
all right,
thank you
thanks
kindly,
for having
sir.
me back, Matt.
I appreciate
really
it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you
Great
kindly.
to see you. Thank you.